Thank you very much, Jorge, for your introduction. Am I able to share the screen now? Yes.
Yes.
So,
in case you have anything with the sounds, you can also tick the box that says share the sound from my computer. Otherwise, the first option should be fine.
okay. Here it is, share computer sound. Yes, so I think that I'm ready. So, can you see the slide? Yep. Yep. So, well, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate your presence. And what I would like to do today is to share with you an analysis that I have done in a very simple question, which is how anthropologists have understood and used the idea of rhythm. And I would like to start this presentation with the following observation, which is that the term rhythm traverses the whole history of anthropology. So among the first references, we will find Frank Boas's description of Coquitl winter ceremonials. At the beginning of the 20th century, Marcel Mauss and then Radcliffe Brown talking about Andaman Islander dances, Gladys Richard when talking about decorative patterns, Evans Pritchard describing Asanda ritual dances, Francis Denmore on 1932, Evans Pritchard in his work with the Nuer. Then in the second half, we will find the work of Leraguram talking about technical rhythms in his gestural speech, Dale Eichelman talking about time in complex societies, Richard Condon bringing all the biological background and talking about chronobiology and photoperiods in Inuit society, Deborah Poole in ritual, and Diane Calendars, Jane Guyer when describing economic life in West Africa, Tim Ingle in his Temporally of the Landscape, Hailey Yu with the first attempt to define rhythm in anthropology. And the thing continue until today. In 1998, we have Mark Harris talking about rhythm in the Amazon, Janet Goodrich talking about rhythm in describing dances, Tim Ingle when speaking about making, and Furani bringing all the political dimension of rhythms regarding poetry, Arab poetry, and Michael Herzfeld talking about rhythms in capitalist life, Joseph Bergmus, as you heard him on Monday, talking about walkie rhythms, Karin Planck, we have the pleasure to listen to her on Wednesday, talking about rhythms, structures, and flow in rituals in Congo. We also have the work of George Lev talking about rhythms in ritual in Candomblé, and also it appears in the work of the Argentinian anthropologist Gonzalo Iparraguirre talking about bringing this concept of cultural rhythmics as a method and a theory to understand how people produce and understand time. We just listened to Gregor Dobler talking about work rhythms and so on. So all this data is meant to illustrate that rhythm really traverses the history of anthropology. And of course, sorry, I have to unmute someone. Yes. So during this whole trajectory, the term acquires different meanings. And we cannot but agree with Hailey that until now there is no unified theory of rhythm. And this polysemic attitude, of course, can cultivate confusion. Iconadieu, for instance, says that we have understand the term as a concept, as a practice, as properties, or sometimes as research method. Yu says that we have confused a category for a concept. The French psychologists, in different occasions, told that a precise, generally unaccepted definition of rhythm does not exist. More recently, Elon Morris recognizes a similar problem, now this time in theater, dance, and performances. Now, beside this polysemic attribute, a careful scrutiny or look at how anthropologists have understand and understood and used the idea of rhythm, we can find three general ways or three general boxes in which all of these words at some point come on each of these boxes. So the first one is order, then flow, and the third one is in between, or is a concept that I'm bringing here. Now, order in relation with rhythm is the most common meaning given to the term in contemporary life, and it's related to patterns and structures, and it's deeply intertwined with music, poetry, and matter. And depending on how we understand time, we will have two branches, those supporting real-time, objective time, and those researchers inclined to think about time as something experiential, sensorial, and lived time. Now, the second box, we will see the relation of flow and rhythm, and it will stand in opposition to the notion of order and structure, emphasize the fluidity of social practices, and this view will echo its original meaning given by the ancient Greek Ionian philosophers. Now, the last one, an in-between category, I think that allow us to overcome the restriction of structures without completely denying the existence of it. It combines both order and flow, plans and secreted actions. So, in this presentation, I would like to examine the three ways of understanding rhythm and to assess the theoretical and analytical potential of each of these postures. So let's start with the first one, which is order. Now, the general principle here is that rhythms entail regular repetitions of an element, and the perception of these repetitions creates order and consequently perceived as pattern. We can see repetitions in many places, in many ways, in walking, pilgrimages, preparing the land for cultivation, or when making mud bricks. This view of rhythm appears at a very early stage in anthropology's history, and we can find it in Boas when he described the Caquital winter ceremonial. And he says that songs are a mixture between words and drum beatings that produce a complex syncopated structure. He says that this rhythmic pattern differs from prophet songs, which begin before the beating of drums. So that songs consist of 4 verses, so he's bringing all this metrical conception of rhythm, and that dances also follow a rhythmical pattern. Another scholar which also illustrates this idea of rhythm is Francis Densmore, who described and analyzed more than 2,000 North American native songs, and for her, an essential stage of any research is to find norms. And these norms could be analyzed in terms of rhythmic units. She said that North American Indian songs follow a rhythmic pattern, which according to their length could be differentiated into 2 variants, short patterns and long patterns. For Densmore, these rhythmical differences responded to the occurrence or not of former contact between tribes. Now, of course, we cannot deny the possibility that rhythms or the shape of rhythm might respond to cultural contact. But we cannot, my opinion is that we cannot reduce the phenomena of rhythm to cultural influence. And for instance, Gladys Richard illustrates this point very well on her cross-cultural analysis of decorative patterns in primitive art. And she demonstrates that rhythmical patterns can emerge as responses to aesthetic inclination or as the result of improvisation and play. And at the bottom of the slide, we can see 2 illustrations that she uses on her article. The first one is a necklace from the Thompson Indians, and the second one is Siberian coat bands. And it's very illustrative of how she's understanding rhythmic and rhythmic repetition. So it's the repetition of the same here. Now, for her, the presence of rhythmical units in material culture was meant to fulfill an aesthetic purpose. given that they generate patterns, usually of symmetrical forms, which are pleasant to their makers and to the observers. So one of the biggest contribution, I would say, of her work is to establish a direct link between rhythm and perception. The problem, however, is that she bounded aesthetics to the perception of beauty. Therefore, she left aside any other sensorial phenomena related with rhythm. Now, in 1964, Leroy showed us that the perception of rhythm entails all our human perceptual apparatus. We are talking about taste, sight, smell, hearing, and touch. And Leroy says that the body, the human body, is the source for rhythm. And he says this in two senses. First, it is the main medium through which we perceive repetition, and second, because the body produces rhythm, and just think on heartbeats. And he says that this sensorial experience appear as frequency, cadences, and alternation of regular periods, which can be of digestion, appetite, or sleeping or walking. Besides this sensorial level, Leroy also suggested the existence of functional aesthetics, which entail the form, the materials, and the rhythms of the movements employed to actuate a tool. This movement includes the repetition of gestures at regular interval and a muscular sensibility. To all this process, Leroy referred to as technical rhythms. Now, another point which is very interesting is that he says that we perceive repetition individually, but also transcends individuals and become collective. And this is because he said that we signify repetitions as with symbols of ethnic significance. And this is quite an important aspect that he renders visible or he highlights, because think on moon phases, on the tides, or whatever type of repetition that we can perceive, and then we transform that into something significant, something that is collectively significant. So he says that space and time do not enter lived experience until they are materialized within a rhythmical frame. Now, this statement or this idea will produce a bifurcation in the study of rhythm. So we will have, on the one hand, people talking about rhythm as objective time, and on the other hand, we will have people talking about rhythm as lived time. I will briefly refer to these both branches. So the idea of time as something lived, something that we experience and that correspond to our experience, can be traced very back, at least to the work of Emil Durkheim in his Elementary Forms of Religious Life. In this work, Durkheim says that time is a category of understanding. Time depends on individual experiences and then transcends the individual and becomes something collective. He says that it is the rhythms of social life that is at the basis of the category of time. So time is produced, or at least conceptualized, through the rhythms of social life. Now, there are there is a large list of anthropologists that are sympathetic to this view, but I'm only going to refer to three of them: Marcel Mauss, Evans Pritchard, and Hailey Yu. So Marcel Mauss, at the beginning of the 20th century, he started analyzing, he wanted to understand social morphology. By this he meant how people organize themselves, the material culture of people, how the settlement patterns of them, and the political institution. So this was his main aim, and he did his research among the Inuit from the Arctic, and he noted a strong response of this group of people to seasonality. So he noted that, for instance, during winter, people used to gather in larger houses, as the one illustrated in this slide at the bottom. These houses gather many familiar units, so it was a kind of more kind of collective sense of society. Whereas during summer, people establish shorter camps, like the one illustrated on the top, the igloo, usually just exclusive or reduced to the family unit, but they were dispersed across all the territory. Now, if we look at his work, we can note the very strong relationship here between seasonality with changes and cycles and periodicities of changes from the environment and people responses to that, but not only in terms, for instance, of their relationship, how they are gathering, the number of people that are gathering in one household or not, but also in material cultures. And also, he noted that it's during winter where the Inuit develop most of their collective activities and rituals. Now, a similar approach was written later by the Evans preacher when looking at the Southern Nuer. And what I find fascinating in this work is that he comes with this threefold understanding of rhythm, or three planes of rhythm. So he says that rhythms have a physical component, which has to do with non-biotic things that are repeating and recurrently repeating or occurring in the environment, such as rains, draw, or river rises or river fall. And he also talked about ecological rhythm, which are the responses of living beings to physical rhythms. Here we can think about the migration of animals, the scarcity of food or plenty of food, and so on. And finally, he noted, or he refers to social rhythms. And social rhythms are a response to physical and ecological rhythm. What I find also fascinating about this work is that Evans Pritchard wanted to understand Nuer's political institution. So he first, and his book, I can say that it could be divided into three parts. So the first part is dedicated to understanding Nuer's ecology. The third one is devoted to Nuer's political institution. And the middle section is dedicated to understand space and time. And here is when Evans Pritchard employs more and more the idea of rhythm. Now, the third work that illustrates this idea of order, of repetitions, is Haile Yu. It's also and illustrate this idea of repetition, but as something lived. So Haile Yu, it's important to highlight that she made the first and is the only one really like exhaustive revision of rhythm in anthropology. And on that paper, she outlines what a theory of rhythm should be. So she expressed that rhythm should be based on time as lived duration, so following this Bergsonian thesis of time, rather than in a mechanical or an abstract conception of it. Now, she also brings something very important, which is very common outside anthropology, but never said that, at least stressed this as you did. That is, if we are dealing with repetition and we experience and we perceive repetitions, then rhythm had to do with the future. We have with something to come, expecting something to come, and with the fulfillment of that thing. Now, on her conclusions, Haile Yu will offer like I think there is 4 main points. I'm only going to talk about 2 because are most relevant for our presentation. And first, she said that rhythm is a category of human experience. And second, that rhythm may serve as an all-purpose metaphor with which we perceive, describe, and interpret the temporal experience of the body. Now, the second view, within this idea of order, and structure is rhythm as objective time. Now, the idea of objective, real, or V-series of time maintains that time is an external dimension from human beings. In this sense, time does not depend on human consciousness. As Tenser mentioned, the perception, context, affinity, and other factors of musical time represent pure semiotic, and therefore unstable variables that cancel one another. So, to illustrate how people approach rhythm as objective time, I'm going to refer to two authors, Michael Tenser and Gottfried Tausend. Now, Michael Tenser, he wanted to create a theory of rhythm, a neutral theory of rhythm, a system of classification for rhythmical phenomena that didn't depend on subjective experience. Of course, it had to be based on objective parameters. I want to stress that these are, of course, Michael Tenser's arguments, and of course, not mine. So these parameters are pulsation, tone or color, duration, envelope, and punctuation. So pulsation, he says, that provides the metrical reference to music and represent the pulse or beat of repetitive elements. Tone or color, he is referring to pitch. And duration, he's talking about objective time and temporal extension of an element. The envelope is the changing properties of an element, and punctuation, I think he's talking about accents. At least he says that they mark segments and produce boundaries. So this is the kind of view that we will have when speaking about rhythm in relation with order and with objective time. Now, the second case that I bring here is not an anthropologist. Is the only person here that I'm going to be talking about who was not an anthropologist. But I wanted to bring him here because it's really fascinating, the type of interpretation that we can reach when we enter into this idea of objectivity and metrics. So this author evaluated different ways of presenting rhythms in terms of their capacity to explain rhythmic complexity. And when doing this, he found that geometric representations, such as distribution of beats in a pentadecagon, enhance our visualization of rhythms. So he analyzes 6 different rhythms, Shiko, Son, Soku, Rumba, Bossa Nova, and Gaku. And this is the how the distribution of the, he's talking about clave rhythm, so striking two sticks. And these are the moments marked here in each of these pentadecagons. So this is more or less what he did. This will be the Son. This will be Rumba. And finally, I'm going to share with you how clave rhythms works in Bossa Nova. Well, as you can see, this fantastic way of illustrating or visualizing rhythm, and the type of interpretation that he reached are like this. So he says that Shiko, Sokus, and Gahu rhythm contain a right interior angle as one of the vertices in their polygons, whereas the other 3, Son, Rumba, and Bossa Nova, do not. Another type of data that he collected from here is that Shiko and Bossa Nova rhythm are palindromes, which means they can be seen from the mirror symmetry of the polygons about the line through position. So this is more or less this very objective and metrical way of understanding rhythm and repetition. And of course, this view has been widely criticized. For instance, Dale Ackerman, who has studied time in African colonial context, tells us that meter, calendars, and clock time do not constitute the main elements to reckon time in non-Western context. Goodrich, who has studied dance cross-culturally, tells us that a definition of rhythm which emphasizes meter is not necessarily appropriate in non-Western contexts. Henry Stobart and Ian Cross, when speaking about Andean music, warn us that meter, as construct within Western music theoretic tradition, may not have the universal applicability that is generally assumed for it. It's important here to highlight that Henry Stobart, he's an ethnomusicologist. He had worked for a long time in the Andes. And I found this quote when in an article that he's trying to notate Andean rhythms. He's very good at music notation, and if you read any of his paper, you will see all the scripts there, and so he's very familiar with that. Even though he struggled with translating Andean rhythms into this metrical system of notation and of understanding rhythm as well. So that's the overall picture when we understand rhythm in relation with order. And I will now turn to rhythm in its obsession of flow. So here rhythm can be defined as a particular way of flowing, as a dynamic coupling of movements, and the general, or as the general flow of action. Now, there are three main principles sustained in this view. First, that social life is dynamic, fluid, and a continuous ongoing process. Second, that there is no identical repetition of gestures, and that matter is not a fixed property of materials. And finally, the third point is that time and space are fluid, and emergent phenomena and resulting from rhythmical resonances between people and their environment. An overview of all of these works show us that there are three major connotations related with the idea of flow. The first one comes from Csikszentmihalyi, for whom flow is a psychological phenomenon that occurs when people are fully devoted or involved or embedded in a task. The second one is related to movements, usually described as fluid, unstable, and dynamic. And the third one draws some parallelism with the Bergsonian thesis of time, this idea of elongated present, and therefore flow is used for describing continuity and wholeness. Sorry. Now I'm going to illustrate these people that approach to rhythm as flow with the work of Tim Ingold, Joe Bergmus, and Karin Planck. So Tim Ingold is one of the anthropologists who have been more emphatic in highlighting the relationship between flow and rhythm, and in arguing against a metrical approach. In his Temporality of the Landscape, he says that temporality, our relationship, human relationship with time, is grounded on practice, and is related with the patterns of dwelling activities. Now, these dwelling activities are tasks. So a task is any practical operation developed by a skilled agent in an environment. He says that a skilled agent is someone who is attuned to its environment. And he says that this attentive state of awareness is complementary to a process of resonance in which the skilled agent responds to its environment and to the field of forces of the materials employed. He says that people also resonate with other people's tasks, a process that results in the formation of a taskscape. Regarding the idea of time, Ingold holds that it is deeply rooted in, or is relational to people's taskscape, and therefore it is related to the A-series, to the visceral, to the live, to practice, and to continuous experiences of task. A metronome, holds the author, inscribe an artificial division into equal segments upon an otherwise undifferentiated movement. Rhythm, by contrast, is intrinsic to the movement in itself. Now, For illustrating this argument, Ingle draws some analogies between social life and music. And he says that both are constituted by rhythmical rather than metronomic time. His second point on this analogy is that in both music and in social life, we do not experience one single rhythm. Conversely, we experience the intersection of multiple rhythmical phenomena, such as natural, social, and bodily rhythms. Later on, in the 2000s, he has a collection of essays on his perception of the environment, and at this point he described with more detail with his rhythmical movements. And he says that the form of material culture, so the shape of anything that surrounds us, tables, chairs, printer, books, whatever, says that the form of material culture emerged from rhythmical patterns of regular movements and not from pre-established mental templates or design. But I forgot to highlight that he's talking, of course, on handmaking or human-made things, not machine. Now he said that rhythmical movements are not mechanical, but rather kinetic resonances to materials and to the environmental fields of forces. They entail judgment, sensorial correction, dexterity, and an attentive consciousness. So as we can appreciate here, rhythmical movements, as long as you resonate with your environment and with materials, they're constantly adjusted. And this means that when you are looking at production from this point of view, you are granting much more agency into materials. They are not just receivers of force, of human force, but they also inform how we move, the gesture we apply, the force, angles, etc. Now, in the textility of making, 10 years later, he stressed again this point that the form of material cultures emerge within field of forces and flows of material, and that matter is not fixed. It is in a constant flux, and that the production of objects is a process of following those fluxes. He says that every gesture is always something new, which cannot be identical. It cannot be a repetition of sameness. He's talking about, and he's very influenced by Deleuze's idea of repetition and difference. So when we respond to our environment, when we are swimming, for instance, in the sea, we are not moving, or we are not repeating the same gesture again and again. We have to resonate, we have to respond to the wave size or to the, I don't know, so many things that surround us. So he's stressing this point. And so the movement are constantly and continuously adjusted to emergent contingencies. And in this regard, then he comes with this idea of itineration as an opposition to operational sequences or iteration. Now, the main difference here is that he says that making something or behaving has a processional quality. And this, along this procession, you respond, you react with your surrounding. Now, of course, this is not the same as following a chain of operations that you will, at the last point of the chain, you will expect some kind of result. Here, it's very much about relations, humans and material relations. Now, the second author that I want to use to stress this idea of rhythm and flow is Joe Bergmus. We have the opportunity to listen to him on Monday, so I'm going to probably do this a bit fast. He analyzes the idea, he analyzes rhythm of walking, and he shows how places are produced through these practices of walking and very related with the rhythm of walking. And a very important point is that he says that is history, the history of a place is not the archives, it's not the paper, it's not what people is just writing about, but it's these sensorial experiences. And so the history of a place is rooted with the rhythms of the practice that are related to it. He says that walking is a rhythmical and spatial practice that entails continuity in which past, present, and future blend together. He says that rhythms are the producer of a space, so he's very much following Lefebvre's argument. Henri Lefebvre is one of probably the key figure in the study of rhythm, at least for cultural geographers, sociologists, anthropologists, and yeah, perhaps many other disciplines. He says that temporality of walking rests on duration. And what I like most of his work, what fascinates me, is he comes with this idea of the ethnographic presence. He says that rhythm is a kind of connector. It is the continual gathering of past, present, and future relations of people's life experiences, and not of chains of causality. He says that the difference between both is that in the later, the present becomes presence. We will find this idea much more developed in Gaston Bachelard and also in Bergson, of course. And there's a beautiful discussion there of present moments, events, and continuity. But what he's bringing here is that this idea that the present is an image of the moment disassociated from time and space, where the presence is time limited only by the diffusive boundaries of experience. Now, this is very theoretical, but it has a lot of applications, especially I think that for everyone, but when thinking about the ethnographic encounter. So when you do ethnography of walking, of course you have to walk. So your ethnography, in a way, is rhythmical. And what happened when this ethnographic encounter, when you are trying to understand other people's life or a place history, what happened when you encounter your informants? Well, he says that a rhythmical encounter produces is a part of a continual gathering of relations, and is a co-presence in the world. When I walk with a certain rhythmicity. If I'm walking with you and we are both having a chat and you are telling me about the city of the place, we are engaging, both of us, in the same rhythmicity. And therefore, he says that this encounter between the other and the anthropologists can be shortened just because of rhythmical phenomena. So I found this a very, very interesting idea. Well, the third author that will help me to illustrate this idea of flow in relation with rhythm is Karine Planck. And she enters into the debate of time in anthropology by stressing two aspects of ritual practices. First, their generative capacities, and second, the temporal experience of continuity they afford. She maintains that in order to analytically grasp both aspects, the analysis of rhythm becomes central. Regarding continuity, well, she told us on Wednesday all this cosmological background of the Puno twins dances, that twins represent a continuation from the spirit world and so on. Here I want to stress just some of her points, and one of them is that in Jipuno, the verb dancing denotes a great movement, the unfolding of a strong energy. And Punu's twin ritual dance prosper in generating continuity and enables one to embrace a whole. And this is because of two reasons. First, because participating in these dances is a rhythmical engagement that gives immediate sensation of the whole, that is not the result of an assembling of parts. And secondly, because the participation in these dances bridges communities of people with communities of spirits. She said that in these rituals, the songs use the figure of the refrain, so about repetition, which is also beautifully explained in Deleuze and Guattari, and changes of intensity. And because of these two elements, they increment the sensation of collectiveness. And altogether, this aspect produce what she referred as a fluid unity. In this sense, the whole ritual is not an assemblage of multiple parts, but is rather a rhythmic totality. She says that this rhythmic totality is experienced simultaneously and as unfolding through time. Now, what I found very, very important as well is that Planck's work revealed that both continuity and fragmentation can coexist. This is to say that the whole rhythmical contrast between flow and structure is or rests upon a false dilemma. So now I'm reaching perhaps the last part of the conversation, where people talk about rhythm as an in-between category. So, and this idea is, we'll find this idea in many authors, but it's Karin Planck who advances this hypothesis by defining rhythm as a liberalization of structure and flow. Now, I'm not gonna go through all these authors because I realize that I don't have too much time. So I'm gonna highlight the key things here. So there are two principles. First, that the rhythms of social life are fully embedded with economical, historical, and political structures, and that in this sense, rhythms are said to emerge in historical settings. And the second principle is that the linear and the cyclical, the metrical and the rhythmic, and the abstract or concrete, the diachronic and the synchronic can coexist. I'm going to skip these slides for the sake of time. I was going to talk about the work of Gregor Doller, but just I want you to see this video and to think about repetition and kind of in-between category. Here, and this is a drawing or building upon the work of Gregor Doller. We can see that the repetition, of course, is not repetition of the same, and we can identify different type of rhythm: steady rhythm, exertion and rest, alternation of tasks, less regular rhythms. And there are multiple factors that are shaping the rhythm of these actions. One, of course, is the political and historical situation in which my friends from the Andes live, but the others are the materials with which people work, what people work with, the social environment, and individual traits of bodily habitus. Now, the problem with looking at this very micro level is that we are forgetting the whole macro level of repetition. And I think that Janet Goodrich is one of the anthropologists that is more clear in stressing this point. So when we are dealing with rhythm, of course we have to attend to the micro aspect of rhythm, to the exact body movements, but also we have to pay attention to larger or wider rhythmical phenomena. So this table try to synthesize the three views with opposing some of the concepts. And I would like to finish this presentation by suggesting the subsequent conceptual outline for an anthropology of rhythm. So as an analytical category, rhythm allows us to observe the temporal and spatial unfolding of human practices at multiple scales and how they resonate with the environment. So we can observe at a micro level, we can observe an in-between level, but of course we can also observe a macro level in the repetition of this, for instance, in micro-action in the frame of wider cycles. Now, the second point is that when we deal with rhythm, we have to attend to the environment. So as shown in this presentation, human practices resonate with ecological and physical rhythm. In this regard, we can observe rhythm in people's responses to seasonal and climatic variations. The third point is that we perceive and we attach values and meanings to repetition, and we do this through our body. The fourth point is that through the rhythm of human practices, both time and space emerge as social categories. And the fifth point is, as noted by Goodrich, is that in human actions, there are multiple features that create rhythms, and therefore the total fabric emerges as a many-layer mesh of relations between components. And finally, I want to stress that in my opinion, rhythm is a very in-between thing that happens. It's in between people, it's in between people and environment, it's in between many different disciplines, but it's also in between within different branches of anthropological inquiry. For instance, in this presentation, we have seen the work from people working in social anthropology, working in material culture, working in biological anthropology. So rhythm is something that crosses boundaries, disciplinary boundaries, crosses different lines of inquiry, and is very located in this kind of in-between space. So thank you very much for listening. And I hope that you didn't get bored too much, and please go ahead with every question that you might have.
Thank you very much, Francisco, for this encompassing and also generous summary, somehow generous outline of the topic of rhythm. I think that it's very pertinent as a closure of this week to have this compilation of people that have been sharing in these conferences, and also people that have other interesting point of view. So I'm going to ask our participants to please turn their cameras on if they feel comfortable with it. We're going to go for the very last section of this session, which will be questions and answers. And so, as always, I want to say that we have the two channels. You can either raise your hands through the button that is available on participants, or you can also drop your question in the text box. So I figure maybe I can start with one question until people have their own time to gather their own inquiries. And I wanted to know, Francisco, since you're bringing this approach that is interdisciplinary, that is broached in different parts, different layers of the phenomenon of rhythm, I was wondering how this cross-modality of rhythm is somehow, or until which degree, is forcing us to also examine different mediums or different materials. Because as I was watching the video that you just showed at the end, I figure maybe the layers of the corn in this case, or the peel of the corn, can be used to examine a rhythmical pattern that is embedded in this situation. Because as you said, and I think some of the presenters before also were highlighting, it's not only a rhythm, individual rhythm, but it's connecting to social rhythm and environment and different other aspects. So I was wondering how that impacts in the materials that we have to explore or examine for the sake of understanding such rhythms.
Thank you, Jorge, for your question. Of course, I strongly believe that rhythm is something that crosses many boundaries. And in that line, of course, force us to expand not only on what we are looking at or where we gather our sources for reading or knowledge, but also, as you said, on maybe on how we can present or communicate information or whatever we want to share. In my experience, one of the things that I really enjoy of looking at rhythm, well, you mentioned I was trained as an archaeologist, and then I did some studies in anthropology. So one of the things that I most enjoy is that when you research on rhythm, you will, at some point, you will have to look at dance, you will have to look at performance, you will have to look at theater, you will have to look at poetry, you have to look at literature, and I think that my very humble opinion is that, and what I feel about like a kind of for anthropologists and archaeologists, especially for archaeologists, is that we need to pay much more attention to how people in those fields express and communicate and share what they know. And I think that that's one of the directions that we should start moving. Yeah.
Thank you, Francisco. We're gonna go ahead with more questions. Does anybody have a comment or observation?
Michelle.
I don't know how to, I don't know how to raise my hand. And I just want to thank you for everything. I really wanted to hear Dobler or so, but I thought we started at 10 today, and so anyway. So thank you to everyone and the participants. And Francisco, that was like amazing. You covered so much material. What I would maybe make a comment and then ask you is that I'm not sure, you know that the term in between is a term that is very loaded because it's related to the in between and the betwixt by Victor Turner. So in between is like relates to liminality. And I don't think that undoes anything that you're talking about. I think it might add it. So I wanted to know if you knew that ramification and how you might incorporate liminality into your developing thesis on rhythm.
Thank you, Michelle. That's a wonderful comment. Yes, I'm aware of the thing of in between. I'm also very inspired, at least in this theoretical level, removing all of ethnographic data. Okay, so just at this very early stage, I'm very inspired as well in the less idea of in between, and I think that is. And I think that it is very, this liminal space as well, is this space where we become more productive, where creativity is, I think that I cannot, I remember like a few weekends ago, I was watching someone playing with a kite on a park. And you see how that person connect, for instance, with the wind, with the environment, with that field of forces, and you can and you see that, and then you also start thinking about, wow, this is a very clever human creation, the kite, so simple, but allows you to create this kind of correspondences with other things. Now that correspondence, my sensation is that it's given by rhythms. It's given by the repetition and by the field of forces of the wind, plus all your sensorial perception of that. So again, I'm placing this idea of rhythm in between the wind, the kite, and yourself. And that's the moment when you become more probably creative, more aware of many other things. And yes, I think that that's more or less the connection that I can think of. Maybe it's also, and of course, it's something that I should explore with much more detail. Like, what about contesting existing structures? What about, you know, because rhythm, well, thank you, Michelle. You made me remember something super important, that is the work of Dee Reynolds. And she talks about exactly how rhythm, for instance, in some dancers, they use it exactly to contest structural patterns of movement at that time.
So can I make is anyone here participating in the EASA conference next week? Because the kite, obviously the kite comes, you know, Ingold talks about the kite, but my research is in Mexico, and I through apprenticeship with coppersmiths. So rhythm is like, all my field deals with material culture, but it definitely relates to rhythm and to dance and to music. And I'm also an artist. So so what I wish, I guess I could share it after somehow, but like I had to produce a video, and it was, I'm not saying this to promote myself, but just to get us to think outside of the box of how push it further. I actually talk about and in the video, because I was like, the talk is about drawing, multimodal practices for developing epistemologies. And so I'm talking about how I use my drawing to analyze my coppersmithing apprenticeship. And in the process of doing it, I realized that what my master that I studied with, what his body became was like the kite. And so his correspondence with the field of forces, because I study like with multi-generations, and I mean, I have over 20 years in a community, and I analyzed this photo that I took, and even compared to his son's, when he hammered, his foot went up in the air. Like, I have a photo where he's off the ground, he's casting a shadow. And I mean, he died, so he's like the end of a certain generation, but like that whole, like that just, it was like, I don't know, so the whole idea that it carries you away. Anyway, so I wish I could share you the video after ESA. I can't do it now, but it's like a video that I produced, but I deal a lot with liminality. Like the in-between is really central to my work. But your organization of rhythm, like I'm working on a monograph right now, and I have to thank you. I mean, it's fabulous. Maybe it relates to what was, I can't remember what the person who presented the thing on the musician, the Afro-Peruvian, I can't remember your name, I see you.
Juan Felipe Miranda.
Juan Felipe, yeah. And Juan Felipe was talking about the idea of like the rhythm is the life, kind of like she believed that it was like the life current, like the force. I mean, I think that kind of relates too. So anyway, that's enough on my part. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Oh wait, I'm sorry, I'm like, I should do a plug. I will send the information later. I just became like a assistant editor on this. It's the Journal of Embodied Research, and we're trying to develop ways where you I think it really relates to a lot of the researchers in this group, but where you submit your research, but not like as a video, like in extra modal methods for how to capture what you're doing. So especially the non-linear thinkers in the group, or even, anyway, so that's like a plug. I'll send it later, but
thank you. Thank you so much, Michelle. Yes, if you can share some more information over the chat, that would be awesome. Now we're going to have to move on with the next questions that we have. And so we have 3 more. The first one will be by Beatriz, por favor.
Hi, I was very impressed on the whole summary that you've done. It's very also like, I don't know, informative. And I was wondering what like all these readings have mean to you in your methodologies, but not only in the methodological approach, but also in the way you engage with people in the field.
Sorry if I understood well your question. How this I translate all this and how I relate, how I conduct ethnography.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think there are multiple points, I guess. So the first one is that I'm trying to look and so I'm going to give you the best example, which is the people that I work with in Peru is a group of dancers, of traditional dances. So I try to observe rhythm at the level of body movements. And in that scenario, I take a kind of, sometimes a distance, so I'm observing and recording. but a very important part of learning or trying to understand that is also to move and to learn the gestures. So I take part on every rehearsal. Of course, I don't dance when they present, when they to larger audiences, but during all the rehearsals, I do my best effort and to learn the different dances. Now, another thing that I use is to some interviews. So I have non-structured questionnaires, and the way I did my question was a big part of that was related with the body and with movement and what is relevant for the people. So do you use your hands? Yes or no? And why do you use it? Why you don't use it? How we have to use our hands? What type of information? Not in that way, but what you do with when you move hands? Oh yeah, I can transmit that this dance is very strong, or the type of that type of information you will have. But I also sometimes I also ask them like more general kind of questions, like what's the relationship that you see between, for instance, traditional dance and the market economy that you are having here in Peru. So I try to tackle the question from different perspective. Now, for me, one of the things that was most important was to talk with them about rhythm, like directly. And they are a group of dance living in contemporary Peru, so it's part of the vernacular vocabulary, it's part of their daily life. They know the term, they use the term. And what I found fascinating is that for them, rhythm works as a connector. And I think that is also probably influencing my understanding of in between. So this group of people, they do traditional dances. They are mestizo, which is like a mixed blood people. Although they live in the Andes, in the very what is defined as the Andes, but they live in urban villages, and perhaps like I don't know, like 1,000 meters above them, like in 4,000 meters above sea level, you have these very far away peasant communities. Now these people dance all the dances from those communities. And for them, rhythm, when you follow the rhythm, when you do the correct rhythm, you are embodying that otherness, that communities and knowledge and body knowledge, movements. So yes, I try to do multiple things, questions, practice, and of course I will suggest to fully engage with the people that you are working with, to spend the most time that you can. And yeah.
Thank you both. We're gonna go now with a question by Juan, please.
Francisco, what can I say? I think that we were all quite amazed with such a huge overview. And my first really short question, which you can answer afterwards, is I really hope that you have written this down somewhere, because it would be really cool to read all of these overviews on the different understandings there are on rhythm. But the question that I actually want to ask is the simplest one of them all. What is rhythm? And I'm going to give a short preamble to this question. For example, from what you've said, I think that it's an unfortunate association that structure is associated with the semiotic. For me, everything that has been said, including the idea of liminality or in-betweenness, corresponds to the production of signification. We construct meaning by repetition, by encountering objects repeatedly, by experiencing them, not only structurally, but as lived experience. Then, so then the trap is, if we say that rhythm is in-betweenness, then we don't need the word rhythm. If we say that rhythm is liminality, then we don't need it either, right? If we say that rhythm is the production of signification, what is it good for? So can we, or not we, like you from your heart and from your researcher mind, what would you say makes rhythm what it is, and an indispensable concept that we really need?
So, yeah, it's an interesting question. Thank you very much, Juan. The way I understand rhythm is I think that at some point I mentioned it during the presentation. Sometimes you can use it as an analytical category. So as an analytical category, you have to define it. You have to define what are you going to look at, what are the properties of rhythm. So for instance, Gregor Dobler, he talks about things affecting rhythms, or materials, the environment, and so on. You can, chronobiologists will be speaking about rhythms in a very perhaps different way, looking at very particular things. So one thing is that I realize is that rhythm exists at least in as an analytical category. That's for sure, and people use it and employ it on the research. Now there's another level of rhythm, which is the vernacular, the how people understand rhythm. For instance, in the example that I did before, my friends from Peru that they dance, rhythm is this kind of connection of the way that you fully, the moment when you fully embody these the dances, the people that you are representing through dance. From my point of view, and the way that I'm working with the idea, I'm taking it as a good tool for looking at, for understanding the temporal and the spatial unfolding of human practice and how we resonate with the environment. That's the way I'm looking at rhythm. I think that it has to do with repetition. I'm not talking here about the repetition of sameness. I'm talking about repetition with novelty. And I'm not completely opposed to the idea of structures and patterns. I think that, of course, they can emerge, but I'm also very kindly to the idea of flow. That's why I think that rhythm is something in between, something very in between. Yeah.
Thank you. We're gonna go with the next question, which I'm afraid is gonna be the last because we are out of time. So please, Maria Jose.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Francisco, for an impeccable overview. And I can relate with all that you explored from my work on how you mentioned how the human body produces rhythm and how you escalated to the interaction with other and how you escalate from one-to-one interaction into a group interaction and into a community. As I said yesterday, I have been practicing contemporary dance improvisation, so I can relate with that sense of like responding to the environment. And there are a lot of improvisation, like instructions related to that exploration, to like hold your rhythm, but like respond to others, respond to the environment, But while practicing, I always thought on how it's not a horizontal interaction, because if it's a class, then there's a teacher that has power. Mm-hmm. And if it's like a workshop, there's a facilitator, for example. And if there's a community, there is power involved. I don't know, a priest, a politician, I don't know, shaman, I don't know, like proposes certain rhythm. And I was thinking how you think about power and how power establishes certain rhythms in all those layers from our bodies that, of course, I don't know, maybe power can change my heartbeat. I don't know. This is my question on how you think of that, maybe technologies of power or so.
Yep. Yes, thank you, Maria Jose. I strongly believe that rhythms are political, and there is no excavatory no exit from that. Going back to the thing on the kite, I also remember in Peru, in the same place where I do field work, so in the same, very similar scene. In this case, were the two children playing with a kite. But the environment and the things that they connected with and they had to interact with was not just the wind, was also cables with electricity and the whole thing that you have there. So what I want to say here is that at the moment that you resonate with the environment, you cannot escape from politics. They are part of that. It's part of your history, it's part of where we live. And I have to skip most of the slide where I wanted to expand more on that. For instance, there are some works on Arab poetry that show how people, in reaction, political reaction against the regimes of power, they change the metrics of poetry. And so you can either use rhythm as a contestation to power, but also we are all living in power structures that I'm thinking, for instance, in my son and the regularity and periodicity of his education. I'm thinking in our works as academics, we have to publish, and you have to follow certain rhythmicity, otherwise it won't be visible. Juan just recently asked if I have written this, for instance. Of course, you want to write it and you want to make it there public, and so of course there is a political dimension of rhythm. There are two key works in this regard. One is Jane Guyer, and she speaks about the politics of rhythm in relation in West Africa, in relation with the change in labor, and looking at gender as well. So change in women labor, and she looks at how the introduction of a new, it was I don't remember, coconut or something. The government introduced something which completely changed the rhythms of agriculture and the rhythm of labor and the division of labor among that community. So of course, rhythm is completely entangled with politics. Yeah.
Thank you both for these comments, these last comments.
Can I say the last Jorge, sorry for interrupting you.
Of course, please.
I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge Elon Morris' work. He's here. Try to look at his work. I'm very inspired on how he understands rhythm and how he provides an amazing literature review as well, and panoramic view of how rhythm had been worked in dance and performance. So yeah, just wanted to say it here in front of you, Elon, that I'm very inspired on your work, and I really appreciate that you have done that as well.
And thank you so much for joining, you, Elon, and everyone else that has been sharing these moments. And we will post any follow-ups or news about this cycle or other cycles in the same Facebook event that we have created. So if you want to have news about this, we will also share through the mailing list that we're going to create based on the people that have registered for these meetings. But it has been a wonderful couple of days. Thank you so much for connecting, for talking, for sharing. And I'm wondering if, Francisco, do you have anything else to close this session? Other than that, I think we're ready to say goodbye.
Just to yeah, we are very grateful that you have participated on this. Our intentions from the very beginning was to offer a space where different researchers can join together to discuss rhythm. We think that we have partially achieved that aim, but of course we want to continue with this type of events. So you are super welcome, very welcome to help us in doing that. There's an enormous group of people outside anthropology, outside dance and performance and theater, that they are also working with rhythm. There are cultural geographers that have amazing work on this topic. We have neuroscience looking at rhythm, biologists looking at rhythm. So it's just want to invite you to continue the efforts of promoting this type of spaces. When you look at rhythm in a general perspective, I feel also that is a good starting point for research. I found that there are no clear gender hierarchies. There are much more space for not only in gender but also in sexuality, and most of us from this group, we are not we are coming from different places as well, South America, from Asia, from Africa. So I think that it really is something in between. It's something in between many things, and just to say thank you very much, and hopefully we can continue with this type of events, and your participation is we embrace that. So thank you very much.